Hi everybody, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. I am doing my February and March wrap-ups, and the reason I waited to do both is because in February I only read 4 books, so I just decided to do one big wrap-up, and later this week I will be doing a book haul, and sometime this weekend I will be doing a second one once I get all of my books for my book clubs. So let's just get into it. The first book that I read in February was for Sarah Carioli's book club, and it's called The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This book here was really good. I gave it a 4 stars. And reading it, I noticed that it was just like the movie Groundhog's Day, where it was the same day that kept repeating over and over and over and over again. And just like Groundhog's Day, she did something different every day. And I'm going to try and keep this spoiler free, but what I put for my review is that is actually one book that would be out of my wheelhouse. I wouldn't pick it up just because of the cover. But when I started reading it, at first I was a little confused as to what was going on. But the more I read, the more I liked the book, and it wasn't one of my fastest reads, but it kept me entertained enough to have me read the book in a day and a half. My fastest read is reading a book in a day. I'm trying to learn how to read a little faster so I can read more. But yeah, the day that keeps repeating in the book is February 14th, and she started suspecting that it was going to stay February 14th forever, and she wasn't understanding why the day was repeating. She wasn't understanding what she was doing wrong. And she kept literally running into this guy named Nick. And I had suspicions all along throughout the whole book that she should be with him. And as the days and weeks went on, she finally figured that out. That maybe she was meant to run into him for a reason. And he had the theory of F them. And so she started doing that. And one of the days, she did the most horrendous things. Break the law, all different kinds of things. And that broke the cycle. And I really don't want to say too much more about it, because if I do, then it's going to give away the book. But the second book I read, I started the ACOTAR series. It was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And that book I gave a 5 stars. And throughout the first book, I learned that Feyre was extremely stubborn with how she wanted things done and how she wanted things handled. And Tamlin was a High Lord in the Prythrian, which is a Fey sector in the Fey world, and she kept rejecting him and kept rejecting him and kept rejecting him, and that this book was a very slow burn. It took 27 chapters for both of them to stop being so stubborn, to fall in love with each other. And it became very smutty at the end of the book. And Tamlin sent Feyre away because of some war that was building, or a curse, and she didn't understand why. The only thing I would say with that is there is a little bit of talk about physical abuse, so if that is a trigger for you, just be aware of that. And I gave that book 5 stars. The second book I read, of course, is the second one in the series, A Court of Mist and Fury. That one I also gave a 5 stars. If you guys see me looking down, I have my book journal, and I've written stuff in my journal, so I'm looking at my notes to talk about the book. So the second book, A Court of Mist and Fury, was also a slow burn. And in that one, there was 69 chapters before Feyre realized that she was falling in love with the Night Court Lord, Rhysand. And, like, for the book tag, what book world would you live in? It would be starting at A Court of Mist and Fury and the rest of the series. Like, Rhysand seems like the perfect man, with the exception of he's a fae. So it was really good, and he suspected all along when he first saw Feyre that she was his mate, as they say throughout all of the books. And it takes her a while, and Rhysand is so amazing and understanding, and he gives her all the space that she needs, and she starts coming out of her shell, and at the end of the book is not something I expected. It was very surprising at the end. So of course I went on to book 3, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin. And that book I also gave a 5 stars to. And A Court of Wings and Ruin, hands down, was the smuttiest book out of the whole series. Like, every other chapter there was some kind of intimate scene, and the way Sarah wrote that book, it showed a lot of true love and how true love should be in my thought process. And the way the third book ended was just absolutely phenomenal. The way I was hoping it would end. And Feyre ended up with who I was hoping she would end up with. One of my favorite quotes out of that book is when he brushed his wing against mine, just because he could, because he wanted to and we'd have an eternity of nights to do this, to see everything together, a gift. Now, I will leave that quote for you guys to read the ACOTAR series and figure out who this was talking, because that's towards the end of the book, and I don't want to spoil it. But those are all the books I read in February, and then I went on to March, and I read the little novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight, and this one had multiple POVs. It had POVs from Feyre, from both of her sisters, from Rhysand, Tamlin, Lucien. It was just kind of how everybody else was seeing the story unfold. And that one I gave a 5 stars as well. Excuse me. The quote I love out of there is, "To the stars who listen, Feyre, to the dreams that are..." So Feyre said, "To the stars who listen," and Rhysand said, "To the dreams that are answered." And it just shows, this book here is the final book from Feyre's point of view, and it just brings full circle to the first 3 books in the series. And then, sadly, I finished the series, and I read book 5, A Court of Silver Flames, and this is told from Nesta's point of view, which is Feyre's sister. That one there, I also gave a 5 stars too. And throughout the whole book, with the exception of probably the last few chapters, Nesta, excuse me, Nesta blamed herself for anything and everything that happened. And the book was really, really good. She never fully opened up to her mate. But she did find that with Feyre and Rhysand and oh gosh, I can't remember their names, and all the other characters that were in the book, that being there with all of them in Velaris is her home. And it was just amazing going through that book and how everything unfolded for her. Do I think that there could be another series just from Nesta's point of view as she works through things like Feyre did in this series? Absolutely. Now, my favorite quote out of A Court of Silver Flames is, "A home, the House of Wind, Velaris, this court, they were her home." So that was fun, and all of those were recommended by Sarah Carioli. I will link her in the description below so you can go check out her YouTube channel. I've gotten so many book ideas, and my TBR has grown so much between watching her channel and Destiny's and Jamie's and Jody's, and my TBR went from maybe 20 books to well over 800. So I'm chipping through them slowly. So the next one that I read was a book club book for Jamie's book club. and it is a man called Ave, and I have never read anything by Frederick Backman. Yes. It was a good book. The old man in the book, Ave, he is very set in his ways. He is very stubborn, and he's also very crabby. But going through the book, learning how his wife died and how over where he's at, the government tries to take people that are incapable of caring for themselves away from family members and putting them in homes and what have you. But it told a very fun story of how he was starting to get over his wife's death because of a neighbor that moved in next door, and she had 2 kids and another one on the way. She, bless her heart, she was the most obnoxious neighbor, but she was so sweet about it. And even after his wife passed, he found a family. And the only other thing I'm going to say about the book is the quote that I picked out of this book. It was very touching. It is, love is a strange thing. It takes you by surprise. So, and that book I gave it 3 stars only because it kept me interested enough to keep going, but like it took me over a week to read it because like it was a slow read. But I would pick up another book by that author, because I did like his writing style for sure. So then the next book I read was a book club pick for Sarah Carioli for March, and it is In a Jam. This is another book world I would love to live in. I have never reread a book. This one I would reread. And the way it ends, I hope she does a sequel. The book was absolutely amazing. I gave it a 5-star. It is a romance, but it is small town, and it is high school best friends to lovers trope, and it's just, and it's also Grumpy Sunshine because he gets really grumpy and she tries to get him ungrumpy, and the little girl in there, oh my gosh, bless her heart, some of the things that she says, that book made me laugh so many times. And there was a lot of smut in the ACOTAR series, but in the book In a Jam, oh my gosh. Wow. Just wow. You'll have to read the book. But he offered to be her fake husband to be able to inherit her, I believe it's her grandmother. Yes, her step-grandmother. To inherit her step-grandmother's farm, or, yeah, farm, orchard type something. And he has always loved her. always, always. And some of the scenes that they get stuck in as being fake husband and wife is just hilarious. And it just gave you a really nice small town feel where you have farmers markets and farms and orchards, and it was an amazing feeling reading that book. So the quote that I picked out of that book is a conversation. Shay starts it. Shay is one of the main characters. It says, "What if he's right?" She says to Noah, "He's not, sweetheart. I swear to you, there's nothing in the world he's right about." There are some trigger warnings in here. Please, please, please look them up. And if you read this book, once you read this, you will completely understand why this was such an amazing conversation between them. And like I said, I gave that book 5 stars. And then my next book is also a book club pick. It's called The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This here is a fantasy book. It does have a sequel. This book here, I read in a day and a half. And for as chunky as it is, kudos. This book here, I also gave a 5-star to. It's an enemy to lovers trope. It is based on vampires. But the way the book is written, it reminds me a lot of Hunger Games. And there is a lot of the same feeling of mates and finding the one in this book. This book was for Jodi's book club, or she's also known as Vanilla Moon on all her socials. I gave it 5 stars, and this one I couldn't find a quote in it. I couldn't. And because there was so many good things in it. And it's got action in it. And there is no really smutty scenes, but there's a couple of instances where there could have been. But yeah, and this one I'm going to hold on to as well because there's a sequel. I'm not sure when it comes out, so I may have to reread this one when the second book comes out. The next book that I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. This one here, I Googled whether a second book came out or not, and V.E. Schwab has no intentions of putting out a second book. And if you've read this book, you get it. If you have not read the book, read the book. It is so amazingly told, where there's 2 people who are, where their life is infinite and they live forever. And she has been The main character in here, Addie, she has been alive for 300 years. Has never aged it in those 300 years. And anybody she meets, she walks away from them. 10 seconds later, they have no idea who she is and that they've already met her. And she is starting to feel so lonely and so alone. And she finally meets Henry. And the quote that I picked out of this book is, Henry says, "I remember. I remember you." And so this book is just phenomenal. I gave this book a 5 stars as well. I'm thinking I may hold on to it to see if I read it again. If I don't read it in the next year, then I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of it. And the final book that I read was The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. And this is the first book I read by her, and oh my God. It was another 5-star read for me. It was a thriller. I have not read a thriller that has kept me on my toes ever. And that book kept me on my toes. It was a cliffhanger for the whole book. And like, all of a sudden you have these weird characters popping up, and there is a huge plot twist towards the end of the book. And the quote that I like out of that book is right on the front of the book. Family first, always. I am definitely going to pick up more books by Karen McManus. This one was absolutely phenomenal. I want to hold on to this because I feel like this is part of a series and maybe I've misread it. So yeah, and this book literally took me a day to read. It just kept moving and kept going through all of the motions. So yeah, that is my February and March wrap up. I will be doing my April TBR and by the end of this weekend, I do believe. And then I will be doing a book haul video sometime later this week. So make sure you watch for that. And make sure you hit like, subscribe, and then share the video with your friends. I'm really trying to get to the goal of 500 subscribers. And then I want to do a giveaway. So thank you again for coming back to my channel. As always, make sure that you put out into the world what you want back. I'll see you later.